Welcome to this timeline on the history and ongoing gentrification in Mexico City. It begins with a history of public land in Mexico City. Self-build urbanization characterized a large percentage of Mexico City's housing development in the second half of the 20th century. Informal housing was the primary way that many residents acquired homes. As such, the government began to attempt to regularize housing policy through various reforms. These housing reforms included from 1995 to 2005. They facilitated mortgages. The mortgages in Mexico City doubled as a result of expansions to mortgage financing. In an attempt to stabilize the housing market, the government subsidized thousands of homes. However, these programs were only accessible to roughly 50% of people and primarily benefited middle-class citizens. Next, there's Bando II. In the year 2000, in order to match the development of the city, the government implemented a policy called Bando II that restricted growth in 9 of 16 delegations and sought to encourage people to move to the 4 central delegations of the city. This included offering tax exemptions, lifting restrictions on parking, and facilitating permits to encourage housing construction. Despite these reforms, the population in the 4 central delegations declined as rents and property values increased. Today, we see the increase and resurgence of mega projects. In 2009, a controversial mega project named Mítica in the neighborhood of Xoco was constructed. The project included multiple luxury apartments, a shopping mall, 70-story tower, and 2,000-car parking garage. The zoning and permits of the area were changed to accommodate for the project, which concerned the residents. For example, the previous maximum building height was 6 stories. The tower is 70. Residents sued the state after property taxes increased by 500% and welfare costs tripled, but lost as the local government made efforts to protect the economic growth that they expected Mítica to generate. Another symptom of gentrification that is happening now is iconography. In many cases, the gentrification of Mexico City is riddled with contradictions. The city attracts workers from other countries, most who work remote jobs, that pursue lower cost of life and a high standard of living. They simultaneously wish to experience the culture of the city in what they believe to be an authentic manner. In cases such as this one, architecture serves as a medium for that experience because it is fundamentally impossible to replace a population and simultaneously experience their culture authentically. Iconicity is a tool of gentrification that has been employed to curate aesthetics that replace the sensation of a local culture, whether it be through architectural typologies or commercial experiences. The image in the picture is the Angel of Independence, which has been a long-standing monument of Mexican pride and national identity, but it has simultaneously become one of the center points in one of the most gentrified neighborhoods of Roma in the city. Which brings us to the centers of gentrification. In recent years, the neighborhoods that have been the most gentrified within the city are Roma, Polanco, and Condesa. Prices in Polanco increased 8-fold from 2000 to 2018. The neighborhood has become entirely unrecognizable to anyone who lived there only a few decades ago. The effects of gentrification spill outside of these neighborhoods. Prices increase in surrounding areas as the cost increases leak outside of their original zones. A large part of this perception is from the pandemic and remote work. Perceptions of gentrification in Mexico City spiked during the pandemic with the rise of digital nomadism and remote work cultures bringing an influx of workers from other countries to the city. Studies on housing access in the city assert that displacement has been the product of government policies rather than the influx of nomads. But recent policies have facilitated an increase in this nomadism, which has increased housing prices, which creates a cycle. At its core, many citizens continue to blame the residents, but in many instances are not as involved with the government because it's more difficult to put a face to the policies that might be facilitating or enabling this gentrification, such as a multi-billion-dollar Airbnb contract to encourage tourism or development, but in reality, those often lead to continued gentrification. Gentrification goes into culture and cuisine. It's not simply about rent increases and displacement. It changes the culture and social fabric of a city. Restaurants in Mexico City are undergoing changes to adapt to the demands of a new clientele. Restaurants that prioritize European flavors and dishes are more frequent, and many street vendors' stands now offer things that cater to a more American palate. The culture of the city begins to parody itself in gentrified neighborhoods, similarly to the way iconicity operates. The effects of this go beyond changes to the menu. Locals are not only priced out of their homes, but their restaurants. They cannot afford to eat in the neighborhoods they live in, even if they might still be able to pay rent. Which moves us to the current protests against gentrification, the culmination of the tensions that have brewed in the past few decades as more and more people continue to be displaced from their homes. Protests against the gentrification of Mexico City have increased as residents continue to be displaced. Tensions have increased, and peaceful protests have become violent in some cases. Citizens are forced out of their homes for very little compensation and are increasingly frustrated with the way the city changes. They receive calls from one day to the next are told, you have 2 weeks to leave, or you can come up with some sum of money and buy the building. But for most people, this is unrealistic and unfeasible. Government policies have failed to reconcile with the changing landscape, and in many cases have enabled gentrification, such as the government partnership with Airbnb. Protests have continued throughout the year as locals seek to prevent their own displacement. It's difficult to balance the desire to pursue one's own community and safeguard this notion of belonging and identifying with it, while simultaneously recognizing that in some cases it may turn to xenophobia or violence. Ultimately, these protests seek to involve the Mexican government in more serious dialogues with the citizens and locals of these neighborhoods in a way that protects their interests and balance it with the government's desire to expand into a more international market and allow themselves to continue to globalize. Whether or not this will come to a clean resolution anytime soon is more than unlikely. However, it continues to be one of the most prevalent issues in Mexico City at this time.
Thank you for watching our History in the Headlines episode. If you enjoyed this series, be sure to like this video and comment on what history you want us to dive into next. If you're interested in how we make our timelines, you should check out Clevis. Follow us on all of our socials linked in the description.